Prophet ﷺ everything about the bird. Rasulullah ﷺ, who has to care for this ummah, sits with this little kid and asks him all types of questions about this little bird. And then even comes to console him when the little bird passes away. SubhanAllah. I mean, and this is the beauty of this, is that you learn the akhlaq of the Prophet ﷺ through all of this as well. You're not just learning about these blessed people, you're learning about the most blessed person. Like, you've got time for that, comforting this little boy over the loss of his bird. But more than that was the tragedy of the death of Umayr himself. So there's a timeline here. Now, Sulaim has Anas. And she, as we said, Al-Bara ibn Malik, possibly as well her son, who's grown at that point as a Sahabi in his own right, that does things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we'll briefly touch on him as well. This is the one child that they've had together in Islam. Okay? Abu Talha and Sulaim. And Abu Talha had a deep attachment to Umayr. Right? His one child, deep, deep attachment. And his death was sudden. So he caught a fever and he passed away rapidly. The fever quickly increased. And of course, at that time, you don't really diagnose these illnesses with anything sophisticated. He died from a fever. Allah knows what he was actually struck with, but quick fever that rose and he passed away. And as devastated as Sulaim was, and I'm going to share this story with a disclaimer from the very beginning here. This is not, what I'm going to share with you of this story is not an expectation. It's not normal. But I want you to think about the spirit of the Ansar, the selflessness which is the characteristic of the Ansar, the extreme selflessness that Allah praises in the Quran, and how that's going to play out in this story. Sulaim is devastated in her own right. This is her child. But she's worried about how hurt Abu Talha is going to be. So she, subhanAllah, and Sister Lubna, you can share all the stuff about how you're not supposed to do this in grief, about delaying your own, and it's true, right? Like, this is a story where we take the value and the blessing and the lesson, but subhanAllah, her whole focus becomes how she's going to break the news to Abu Talha when he comes home, when he finds out about the death of his son. So she says to Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, لا تخبره حتى أنا أخبره. Don't tell him until I tell him. Let me break the news to him. And so she's grieving her son. She doesn't tell him. I mean, obviously there is no way to tell him when he's not home. And he's out somewhere on the outskirts of Al-Madinah. And she cooks a feast. She dresses nicely. She tries to prepare herself to tell him in a way that will comfort him and console him and allow him to be pleased with the qada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be pleased with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the same evening that she goes through this, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she cooks the food, she dresses well, he would have no idea what has happened. And she leaves Umayr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu in his sarir, in his bed, and she's thinking about how she's going to break the news. Abu Talha comes home. She doesn't tell him. She waits. These are natural human struggles, right? How am I going to tell him? Maybe she had it in her mind that she's going to tell him right away, but she's struggling to break the news to him. The night passes, and they are together as husband and wife. Okay? The morning comes. She still hasn't told him. And she's struggling to tell him. Abu Talha thinks, natural day, I came home, my son was asleep. We ate and we slept, woke up, and Sulaim says to him, Ya Abu Talha, if someone loans you a gift, gives you a trust, a trust, and comes back and says, I want to take that trust back now. Right? Someone tells you, like, here's a trust, you can benefit from it for some time, but then when you finish with that trust, or when I need to take it back, I'll come back and get it from you. How should you return it? So Abu Talha said he should return it with gratitude, with shukr, right? Like that, for whatever time you allowed me to make use of it, to benefit from this trust, from this gift that you gave me, alhamdulillah. You should benefit. So Sulaim radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she says to him,